McBride was just elected. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace is leading the charge to prevent her from using the women's bathrooms. What's your reaction to this? And broadly, how should Democrats be approaching this issue of trans rights?
Yeah, I think that we need to make sure that people are people. And frankly, I think that we have so much other to worry about. And we have, budget deficits. We have crisis all around the world. We have a humanitarian crisis going on in Gaza. We have Ukraine. Russia is making headway there in its illegitimate invasion of Ukraine. We have issues here in this country. And yet she's worried about one member of Congress using the bathroom.
Wow. Tammy Duckworth, interesting comments about Sarah McBride, the first transgender congressperson on the Hill, and now a bill been putting forward not allowing Sarah McBride to use the women's washroom as a biological man. Hi, everyone. My name is Christopher. I'm the host of the Open Minds Show here on YouTube, and I'm trying to inject a level of political moderation back into our discourse that's super hyper politicized. So if you're liking my content, definitely hit that like button, subscribe, share, tell all your friends. Folks, what's interesting here is Sarah McBride is the first transgender individual elected to the Hill and is a biological male. And Nancy Mace on the Republicans has put forward a bill prohibiting Sarah McBride from using the women's washrooms on the Hill, although I understand every congressperson has their own private washroom. But what's interesting here is Tammy Duckworth's response, Tammy Duckworth representing the Democrats. I'm curious to see how many Democrats are actually downplaying the issue of trans use of washrooms. Because I think what they found in the election was that many people, including moderates, including Democrats, are very much divided on the issue of a biological man using a women's washroom. And although this is a very nuanced discussion that requires a lot more nuance and a lot more discussion, to be honest, at the end of the day, people are very divided on this issue. And it's interesting to see Tammy Duckworth sidestep the issue and focus more on external issues that are affecting the United States. It wasn't that long ago that identity politics and specifically trans discussions dominated literally everything that Democrats would fight for and talk about. But I think after this election, they started to recognize that people are much more focused on the economy, and a lot of these social issues require a lot more discussion in public about all of the nuance before people actually make up their minds. But here's what Sarah McBride had to say about all of this, what's happening right now.
Representative-elect Sarah McBride of Delaware says she will abide by a new policy implemented by House Speaker Mike Johnson prohibiting transgender people from using bathrooms on Capitol Hill that do not correspond with their, quote, biological sex. Earlier today, the first openly transgender woman elected to Congress sat down with me and discussed why she is complying with this controversial measure.
I would like my grace to contrast with the grandstanding that we're seeing right now. I would like my approach of respecting everyone to contrast with the disrespect that we are seeing right now. I'd like people to see my competence in governing contrast with their chaos.
Do you follow this rule? Do you adhere to it?
I have already said that I will not use multi-stall women's restrooms in the Capitol. But again, that is my choice here. I always knew that there would be an effort to politicize my use of a restroom. Yeah. And if anyone had thought to ask me about what I was planning on doing, I would have been happy to tell them. Yeah. But again, this is not an issue. And this has never been an issue in this complex. Everything was fine until some members of the small Republican conference majority decided to get headlines and to manufacture a crisis.
Sarah McBride takes the oath of office on January 3rd.
So I'm kind of torn on Sarah McBride's statements there. On the one hand, I see that certainly people should have asked her prior to 100%. But on the other side, sorry, I'm stumbling over my words here. On the other side of this, I think she must have known that this would have caused controversy and she should have come out ahead of it. I don't know if she did. So someone quote me if I'm incorrect, that it was never her intention to use female washrooms once she gets on the Hill. So part of me says she must have known that some would be uncomfortable with it, but I also see her point about being asked ahead of time. But all of this to be said, I think what's really interesting here to me is Tammy Duckworth's response. Again, it was very much, we've got other things to worry about. This is not something we should worry about. To me, that signals a shift by the Democrats away from trans use of different washrooms. Again, this was a major, major issue for many during Biden's presidency and even before, but I think it really ratcheted up over the past few years. And again, I think this is a very nuanced discussion that requires a much more detailed conversation. But the reality is that I think as a society, we've skipped over that detailed conversation and we've allowed people to put forward policy ideas that are quite extreme in some cases in some jurisdictions where this type of where trans use of the other washrooms are allowed. And again, I think that runs counter to many moderates who are questioning whether or not this is a good thing. And I think, to be honest, folks, this is something that is very divisive for parents in particular, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat. I really do think that moderates who decide every election, but moderates when it comes to trans rights, have a really hard time understanding the nuance and unpacking this and making sure that their children or themselves feel safe in a washroom. Now, whether or not there's an actual threat, it's the idea that there's a perceived threat, and whether or not that's real or not, it doesn't matter. It's perceived. And I think as government, there's a reaction that's necessary to ensure that a perceived threat is at least addressed. And I think we as a society need to be talking about trans rights when it comes to bathroom usage more openly, where we have very uncomfortable conversations so that we establish a better base of understanding before we move forward. But again, I think Sarah McBride knew that her being trans would necessarily draw to the attention usage of bathrooms on the Hill. And I think, to be honest, Sarah, and correct me someone if I'm wrong, could have come out earlier and saying, if I am elected, I have no intention of using female washrooms when I get to the Hill. I recognize as congressperson, I will have my own washroom. It's never my intention. She must have known that, and she must have known that there would have been Republicans who would have been against that in the first place. But again, to me, the more interesting piece to all of this is Tammy Duckworth, Democrat senator's response, shifting away from what are the issues affecting trans communities members to external issues that are affecting the United States on a global level. So to me, that's a much more interesting conversation because to me, it seems like Democrats are not willing, or some Democrats are not willing to push forward on this issue because perhaps they're recognizing that moderates themselves find this very divisive and will most likely not push forward on this in future elections. But let me know what you think about Sarah McBride and this policy that's being put forward by Republicans. What are your thoughts? Do you see both sides, or do you think that Sarah McBride should be allowed entry into female washrooms should she choose? Let me know what you think in the comment section below.